Little Bonnie lived in a cozy wooden cottage at the edge of a vast, whispering forest. Her home had a bright red roof, a chimney that puffed out tiny clouds of smoke, and windows shaped like circles, making it look like something out of a fairy tale. The cottage sat on a small hill, surrounded by wildflowers in every color, bluebells that swayed in the breeze, golden daisies that reached for the sun, and tiny purple violets that peeked through the grass. A stone path wound from her front door, leading down to a sparkling brook that danced over smooth pebbles. Sometimes, Bonnie would sit by the water, dipping her toes in and watching the fish dart between the rocks. Beyond the brook stretched the great green forest, a place full of towering oak trees, rustling leaves, and the scent of pine and earth. During the day, the forest was alive with the chatter of birds, the scurrying of squirrels, and the soft hum of the wind. But as the sun began to set, long shadows stretched between the trees, and the forest seemed to whisper secrets only the trees could understand. Bonnie loved her home. She loved the smell of fresh bread baking in the kitchen, the warmth of the crackling fireplace at night, and the sound of her mother humming while tending the little vegetable garden behind the house. But most of all, Bonnie loved to explore. And on this day, the day she wandered too far into the woods, her adventure was about to begin. It was a golden afternoon, and little Bonnie had only one thing on her mind: blueberries. She had been waiting all week for the berries in the forest to ripen, and today was finally the perfect day to pick them. With a woven basket in her hand, she skipped down the stone path from her cottage, across the brook, and into the great green forest. The trees stretched high above her, their leaves dancing in the wind, casting speckled shadows on the ground. Sunlight trickled through the branches, making everything glow warm and golden. Bonnie knew the forest well. She had picked berries here many times before. "I won't go too far," she told herself as she spotted a plump, juicy bunch just beyond the path. She reached for one. Then noticed another even bigger patch just ahead, then another, and another. She wandered deeper and deeper into the forest, following the trail of perfect blueberries without thinking about where she was going. By the time she looked up, everything was different. The trees were thicker, their branches twisting overhead like giant arms. The sunlight was dimmer, and the air felt still and quiet. Bonnie turned around quickly. Where was the path? She spun in a circle, but all she could see were trees, endless trees. Her heart began to race. She took a step forward, then stopped. Which way was home? Stay calm, Bonnie, she whispered to herself. You just need to think. But before she could take another step, she heard it, rustle, rustle. A bush nearby shook. Something was there. Bonnie held her breath. Then out popped a fox. But this was no ordinary fox. He had sleek, orange fur, bright golden eyes, and a bushy tail that flicked playfully behind him. He looked at Bonnie with a clever grin. Lost, are we? He said smoothly. Bonnie gasped. A talking fox? Before she could even be surprised, the fox sat down, curling his tail around his paws. I can take you home, he said, his golden eyes twinkling. But first, you must pass 3 challenges. Are you ready? Bonnie swallowed her fear. She had no choice. Bonnie hesitated. She wasn't sure if she could trust the fox, but she needed to find her way home. What kind of challenges? She asked, gripping her basket tightly. The fox smirked and stood up, his tail flicking playfully. Simple ones, he said. If you are clever and brave, you'll pass them easily. Bonnie took a deep breath. She had no choice but to try. All right, she said. What's the first challenge? The fox's golden eyes gleamed. The first challenge is a test of kindness, he said. Follow me. Bonnie followed the fox through the trees until they reached a small clearing. In the middle of it sat a tiny, trembling bird. Its wing was stuck beneath a heavy twig, and it chirped weakly. Here is your test, the fox said. You must decide, do you help the bird, or do you leave it? Bonnie frowned. Of course, I'll help it, she said, kneeling beside the bird, but as she reached out, the fox stopped her. Be careful, he warned. Not everything is as it seems in this forest. Bonnie hesitated. The twig didn't look that heavy, but what if there was a trick? She gently touched the twig and noticed something strange. It was warm. She pulled her hand back. Why would a twig be warm? then, she looked closer and gasped. The twig was moving. It wasn't a twig at all, it was a sleeping snake, the fox chuckled. I told you to be careful, Bonnie's heart pounded. If she had grabbed the twig without looking, she could have startled the snake. But now she knew she had to be gentle. She searched the ground and found a long stick. Slowly, carefully, she used it to nudge the snake away from the bird. The snake slithered off into the bushes without a sound. Bonnie then lifted the now free little bird into her hands. It chirped happily, flapped its wings, and flew away into the sky. The fox nodded approvingly. You passed the first challenge, he said. You were kind, but also wise. That is the mark of a true adventurer, Bonnie smiled, feeling a little braver than before. What's the second challenge, she asked. The fox grinned. Follow me and find out. Bonnie followed the fox deeper into the woods. The trees grew taller and darker, their branches twisting overhead like bony fingers. The cheerful golden sunlight had faded, replaced by cool shadows and the rustling of unseen creatures. Bonnie hugged her basket tightly. Where are we going? She asked. The fox's golden eyes gleamed as he glanced back. To your second challenge. This one is a test of bravery, Bonnie gulped. The fox stopped in front of a fallen tree that stretched across a narrow path. Beyond the tree, the ground sloped downward into a deep, dark cave. Mist curled around its entrance. And from inside, Bonnie could hear a low, echoing sound, like a deep, rumbling breath. Inside this cave, the fox said, lies something important. But if you want to pass, you must go in alone and bring it back. Bonnie's stomach twisted. Alone? She whispered. Alone, the fox confirmed. She peered into the darkness. What if there were monsters inside? What if she got lost? She looked at the fox. What am I supposed to find? He smirked. You'll know when you see it. Bonnie took a deep breath. Her hands trembled, but she stepped forward anyway. As she walked into the cave, the sunlight disappeared behind her. The air was cool and damp, and water dripped from the rocky ceiling. The deeper she went, the louder the sound became, a deep, slow breathing. Then she saw it, a massive shadow curled up in the darkness. Her heart pounded. It was a sleeping creature, and right in front of its giant paws, glowing softly in the dim light, was a golden feather. That must be it. Bonnie thought. She tiptoed forward, careful not to make a sound. She reached out, her fingers inches from the feather. Zack, her foot snapped a tiny twig. The creature stirred. Bonnie froze. A single, giant eye blinked open. It was a great, golden owl. The owl stretched its massive wings, its gaze fixed on Bonnie. Who dares take my feather? It rumbled, its voice deep as thunder. Bonnie's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, but then she remembered the fox's words. This is a test of bravery, running wouldn't help. She had to face her fear, summoning all her courage. Bonnie took a deep breath and said, Please, great owl. I did not mean to disturb you. I only seek your feather to complete my challenge. The owl studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, it nodded. You are polite and brave, it said. Take it, little one. Bonnie carefully picked up the golden feather, its surface warm and shimmering. As soon as she held it, the cave seemed brighter, and the owl folded its wings. Going back to sleep, she turned and rushed out of the cave, her heart pounding. When she stepped back into the sunlight, she gasped for air. She had done it. The fox grinned as she held up the feather. You faced your fear, and you passed the second challenge, he said. One more to go. Bonnie smiled, standing a little taller. What's the last challenge? She asked. The fox's grin widened. Patience, little one, he said. That is exactly what you must learn next. Bonnie followed the fox deeper into the forest, her golden feather safely tucked into her basket. 2 challenges down, 1 to go. This last test is different, the fox said. You've shown kindness. You've shown bravery. But can you show patience? Bonnie frowned. What do I have to do? The fox led her to a clearing with a single tree in the center. It was tall and covered in silver leaves that shimmered in the breeze. But what caught Bonnie's eye was a single, glowing fruit hanging from one of its highest branches. It was golden, round, and pulsing with light, like a tiny sun. "Your task is simple," the fox said. "Pick the fruit," Bonnie grinned. That was easy. She ran to the tree and jumped, reaching for the fruit. But her fingers barely brushed the bottom of it. She tried climbing, but the trunk was too smooth to grip. She even threw a small rock, hoping to knock it down, but the fruit didn't budge. Bonnie huffed in frustration and crossed her arms. "This isn't fair. How am I supposed to get it?" The fox simply sat down and watched. Bonnie paced back and forth, growing impatient. She had been through so much already. "Why wouldn't the fruit just fall? Maybe I'm not supposed to pick it at all," she muttered. She stopped, looked up at the fruit, and took a deep breath. "Maybe. I just need to wait." So she sat beneath the tree and listened to the forest, the whispering leaves, the chirping birds, the rustling grass. Minutes passed, then something magical happened. A soft breeze swept through the clearing, shaking the branches. The golden fruit wobbled, then fell gently into Bonnie's lap. Her eyes widened in shock. "I did it!" She looked at the fox, who grinned. "Sometimes, no amount of force or frustration will bring what you seek," he said. "Patience brings the greatest rewards." Bonnie held the glowing fruit close to her chest, feeling warmth spread through her. She had passed the final test. "Now," the fox said, standing up, "it's time to go home." Bonnie stood in the clearing, holding the golden fruit in her hands. The fox watched her with a knowing smile. "You have passed all 3 challenges," he said. "You have learned kindness, bravery, and patience. Now, it's time to go home." Bonnie looked around. The forest still seemed deep and endless, and she had no idea which way led back to her village. "But I still don't know the way," she admitted. The fox flicked his tail and nodded at the fruit in her hands. "Look closely, Bonnie." She lifted the fruit and gasped. Its golden glow had changed. Inside its shimmering surface, she could see something, a reflection of the path home. "It's showing me the way," Bonnie said excitedly. The fox nodded. "Because you were patient, the answer came to you. Now follow it, and you will find your way back." Bonnie took a deep breath and stepped forward, following the golden glow. As she walked, the trees seemed less dark, less twisted. The path became clear, the air warmer and familiar. And before she knew it, she stepped out of the forest and saw her village in the distance. Bonnie turned to thank the fox, but he was gone. All that remained was a single silver leaf drifting to the ground. She smiled. Maybe she would see him again someday. Clutching the golden fruit, Bonnie ran home, eager to tell everyone about her adventure and the lessons she had learned. And from that day on, whenever she faced a challenge, she remembered: A. Kindness opens doors. B. Bravery pushes you forward. C. Patience reveals the way. And most importantly, sometimes, the path you're looking for is found when you stop trying to force it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.